The most important lesson is it's not a rogue if it doesn't use daggers.
Remember, wizards, when it comes to fireballs, size does matter.
Alright class, settle down. It's time to learn to die like a ranger.
Jimmy, get the glue out of your mouth. Today we're going to be talking about the eternal honor of the Paladin.
Attention class, please be seated.
Welcome, I'm Draq Attack, your Doctor of DPS, and this is my introductory class on the Master of the Arcane and Elemental DPS, the Wizard. As many of you know, passing your Wizarding 101 class is a requirement for all freshmen here at MMORPG University, so you need to pay attention, because you have to pass this class. I will introduce to you many different types of wizards across many different types of games, some good and some bad. At the end, I will assign a final grade, and we will discuss what elements of the game I liked and what I did not, and what elements of the game I think Pantheon Rise of the Fallen should keep, and ones that they should ignore. If you have any questions, or thoughts, or even a grade of your own that you'd like to leave in the comments below, I'd really appreciate it. Before we dive into this week's wizard, I'd love to spend a few moments and describe what I think are the 5 main characteristics of the ultimate wizarding class in an MMORPG for me. That way, as we dive into different wizards across different games, we have a standard on which to grade things on. Number 1, a wizard should do the most damage, but they should not be able to absorb much damage. In the MMORPG world, we call this the glass cannon. A wizard should not be at the front lines. They should not be absorbing blows. They should be in the back, raining down fire on everyone. The extra squishiness of the wizards is the trade-off we get for doing our massive DPS. Number 2, wizards should do direct damage. Dots are for necros and for shaman, and should be the master of elemental damage, specifically fire. Wizards should also have access to different types of AoE spells. Number 3, wizards should not have pets. It's okay to have familiars, but those familiars should not be able to take damage. They should either be some kind of buff or give you some type of other advantage, but not actually do damage or take damage themselves. Number 4, wizards should not be a utility or support class, but should contain some utility and support as a part of their kit. Things like escapes, warps, roots, stuns, those are all okay as long as they're not overdone. Wizards should always have a few tricks up their sleeve. Wizards should wear cloth armor and wield spellcaster type weapons. Things like two-handed staffs, wands, or orbs, or any other kind of spellcaster type equipment are all good. Leave the swords, spears, and daggers to the warriors and the rogues. So for this session, we'll be looking at the Dungeons & Dragons Online Wizard, or DDO. The official definition for the wizard in that game is: wizards are adaptive and versatile arcane casters who gain 5 extra feats as they level to further enhance their spellcasting. Wizards have more spells available to them than sorcerers do, being able to change spell selection at rest shrines or taverns, ensuring they always have the right spells for the job. They do not, however, have as many starting spells as sorcerers. Wizards often perform as DC casters, focusing on spells that instantly kill, control, charm, debuff, or otherwise disable/weaken enemies, rather than direct damage. The primary attribute of the wizard is intelligence, determining maximum spell points and spell casting effectiveness. As we will discuss later, DDO classes are very fluid and customizable, but as far as definition goes, that's pretty good. Focusing on spells and instantly killing enemies sounds really good to me, and is always something I like to see in my wizard class description. So let's go over their weapons and armor. This is where it starts to get super crazy. In DDO, there are basically no restrictions on weapons and armor that you can use as a wizard. There are a few penalties to spellcasting, but nothing says you can't saddle up with your two-handed sword and plate armor and go at it. Because all types of gear drop all kinds of stats, so you could totally make that happen. Some people even on the forums suggest it. Say, what? For my playthrough, though, I stuck with robes, wands, and staves to maintain my normal wizard feel, and I feel you lose a little something on the class definition when you make things 100% totally customizable with all weapons and armor types. Okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Today I'll be ranking Dungeons & Dragons Online Wizard in 4 different subjects: combat, utility, pace of play, and identity alignment. Just as a side note, I tend to enjoy my MMORPGs and ultimately look for the good in everything, so make sure you factor that in when you listen to my grades. The first grade to hand out is for combat. Once I got used to the combat in DDO, it was pretty fun. Mobs die pretty quickly, and with a group I can just sit in the back and rain down magic missiles and fireballs on everybody. I also have a few CC utility type spells that were useful if we were being overrun. The thing that stands out to me more than anything from any other MMORPG we have played thus far is the mana management. There is no mana regen in DDO. You have a set pool of mana that you can use on your mission until it's gone or until you find a shrine to rest at. That really gave me a feeling of needing to not just be blast happy on every single mob that we ran into, but I had a sense of needing to maintain mana just in case we ran into something really difficult. My magic missiles spells were fairly low mana costing, so I could kind of use them whenever I wanted. But if we ran into a big boss, I would use the fireball spell, or ice ball spells, which did a lot more damage. And sometimes I could nuke down bosses in 2-3 spells. It's an interesting dynamic that I really enjoyed. I felt like I had pretty good spacing with my spells. I had as much mana as I needed as long as I used my mana judiciously. While my group rarely needed to rest at shrines, I pretty much always rested at shrines every time we saw one. This was only really an issue if we died and then I had no mana, but I had already used the shrine, so I couldn't use it again. I also really enjoyed the environmental dangers of DDOs. The traps, the doors, and the puzzles really made the game scene interesting and fun, and gave it a nice change of pace. Last but not least, I felt like if I wanted to do massive damage and I didn't mind burning through all my mana, I could put out huge DPS. I found this to be pretty interesting, because while the Ranger and the Rogue probably put out more DPS over time than me, I was able to do huge burst DPS. And so if I can't have the absolute most DPS in a game, I'm okay with actually being burst DPS and being able to put out the most DPS at one time, being able to burn down a mob. That's an okay trade-off for me. Overall, I give the combat in DDO an A-. It has all the wizard spells and themes you'd want, and with a group, it is really fun combat. The wizard does a ton of damage, and I always feel like I'm useful in the group. Next, let's talk about utility. My wizard in DDO had okay utility. I mean, it really depends on which way you want to spec out your character, since there are no real limits on how you do things. Our group had a rogue and a rogue bard, so I didn't really feel the need to worry about traps or opening chests. There were also some summon creature spells that I didn't really want to get into, because I felt like I'd be headed down the summoner or necromancy route. The main utility I provided for the group was crowd control. I had a hypnotize spell that worked on only humans, and a color shift spell that worked on humans and animals. Pretty much the only thing I couldn't crowd control was undead type mobs. While I don't think crowd control should be the focus of the wizard, that's for enchanters, I don't mind the wizard having a few elements of CC in their kit. Granted, we only got to level 4, but I didn't have any type of movement spells or get out of danger type spells. I really feel like that should be a part of any wizard kit. Maybe wizards get something like that a little bit later or higher levels, I don't know. Overall, I give the utility in DDO for the wizard class a B. My wizard has a few CC spells, and if I wanted to, I could have gone more utility, but that just wasn't the route I wanted to go. Next, let's talk about pace of play. The pace of play for the DDO wizard and DDO in general is pretty fast. We either killed mobs very fast or we died very fast. There wasn't much in between. I really have come to appreciate the longer fight times of EverQuest, EverQuest 2, and the future Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. Mowing down mobs over a rapid pace is just kind of blah for me. I also didn't really like the quest hub type system that DDO uses. I think Nathan commented that DDO even took the time to line up all the quest givers in a line, so we didn't even have to run around town to find the quests. It pretty much boiled down to clicking on things as fast as possible, not caring about what the quest NPC mobs said, going out, completing all the quests, and then fetch quests, and then turning them back in. That's okay for a while, but it just really leaves me kind of wanting more. Overall, I give the pace of play a D+. The pace of play can become just kind of a grind fest. I kill all the mobs, I don't care about it, I turn in the quest I didn't read, so I can get gear that I really probably won't even use. The whole thing sounds exhausting as I sit here and talk about it, honestly. Last of all, let's talk about the wizard's identity and how it matches what I think the wizard should be. For me, the wizard is so iconic. I think it's pretty hard to screw up. Gandalf, Merlin, and even Harry Potter have molded a pretty good image into our minds of what the wizards should be. In this case, the Dungeons & Dragons wizard itself is actually iconic. I remember rolling a wizard in D&D 20 years ago, pen and paper, with my friends as we did a D&D adventure, sitting around, casting magic missile at the darkness. But the problem is, for me, an MMORPG wizard is vastly different than what a pen and paper RPG wizard should be. One of the things that I like about MMORPGs is choosing my class and working within the confines of that class to make it mine. I can make customizations within the class, but I still maintain the integrity of what the original class is. That's not what the DDO wizard does. DDO just kind of gives you a blank slate and says, here, do whatever you want. You can make a plate wizard, go for it. You want to be a ranger wizard? That's fine. You prefer a wizard that only summons pets? No problem. I'm just not a huge fan of that. Being able to customize everything means I have no class identity. I really crave class identity. It's super important. So sorry DDO, but you get a D for class identity. I can make the wizard I want, but I don't feel like I fit into a class of other wizards in the world, and no other wizard really plays anything close to what I play. We are just people that started out as a wizard and then did whatever we wanted and ended up with a completely different characters that have really nothing in common. What can Pantheon learn to do or not do from this class? I'd never really played DDO before doing these recordings. And surprisingly, I think Pantheon could take a few things from DDO and incorporate it into their game. First of all, I really like the way that the burst damage of the spells played out. Making a way where wizards can burst down enemies but not have crazy overall DPS numbers is intriguing to me. I also really like the environmental dangers, the traps, and the puzzles that DDO presented. Things I would not copy from DDO is the way they implemented classes. DDO classes are barely classes and are more just at the starting spot for you to do whatever you want to do. As I said before, I'm not a huge fan of that. This shouldn't be a problem for Pantheon because Pantheon has very defined classes that, while they can be customized through the mastery system, will still maintain the flavor and class identity of the class you picked at the beginning. To recap, I give the EQ2 wizard an A- in combat, a B in utility, a D+ in pace of gameplay, and a D in class identity. I give the overall score of the DDO wizard a B-. That leaves the DDO wizard as barely above average wizarding for me, which is pretty much where it lands. I really enjoyed DDO with the crew, but I really wouldn't be a game that I would play on my own. The combat was fun, but instancing everything, the massive quest hubs, and the lack of really class identity just kind of make it a non-starter for me. Up next in the MMORPG series is Dark Ages of Camelot. I played this game when it came out, and I really fell in love with it. I didn't play a wizard at the time, though. I didn't even play in Albion, which is where we'll be playing now. I played in Hibernia, and so it breaks my heart a little bit because I'm kind of a Hibernia for life guy. But we'll be doing Albion this time because it has the wizard class, and that's what Nathan loves. So I'll be, I'm sure, complaining the whole way about how we're playing in Albion, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the DDO wizard. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Dark Ages of Camelot. Please make sure to just leave some comments below. And make sure to tune in every Tuesday as we continue our adventures in MMORPG University. This is Draq Attack, the Doctor of DPS, evacing out.